Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair, watching the stars drift past the main screen. The UES Vengeance had been on patrol for 3 months now, checking the quiet systems along the outer rim. It was boring work, but necessary. Someone had to make sure the trade routes stayed safe. The bridge was calm and peaceful. Lieutenant Amy Collins worked at her station, monitoring the communication channels. Commander Lisa Bennett stood near the tactical display, reviewing their next course. Everything was normal until the speakers crackled to life with a sound that made everyone freeze. Static filled the air, mixed with something that sounded like screaming. Amy's fingers flew over her controls, trying to clean up the signal. Her face went pale as she worked. The sound got clearer, but what they heard made it worse. "This is Elder Kethvar of the Zalani Council," a voice said through the noise. The words were broken and filled with terror. "We are under attack, species unknown to us. They consume everything in their path. Our defenses mean nothing. They eat our ships, our cities, our people. Please, anyone who receives this message, send help. Do not let them spread. Do not let them find your worlds." The message cut off, leaving only empty static. The bridge was silent for a long moment. Jake looked at his crew and saw the same shock on every face. The Zalani were known across the galaxy as master builders and peaceful traders. Their crystal cities, floating in the rings of their gas giant homeworld, were considered one of the wonders of the galaxy. For something to attack them was bad enough, for something to terrify them this much was worse. "Amy, when did we receive this?" Jake asked. "The signal just reached us, sir, but looking at the transmission markers, it was sent over 6 hours ago." Amy's voice was quiet. Lisa stepped forward, her hand moving over the tactical display. "Sir, I'm not reading any signals from the Kepler 442 system. Nothing at all." Jake felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. The Kepler 442 system was home to over 2 billion Zalani. Their cities generated massive energy signatures that could be detected from several light years away. For the system to go completely dark meant something terrible had happened. "How long to reach their system?" he asked. "At maximum speed, 14 hours, Lisa replied. Jake stood up from his chair. Around him, his crew waited for orders. The Vengeance was a Titan-class battlecruiser, one of humanity's most powerful warships. She carried a crew of 1,200 and weapons that could crack planets. But Jake had fought enough battles to know that power meant nothing if you didn't use it right. "Set course for Kepler 442, maximum speed," he ordered. "All departments, prepare for possible combat situations. I want damage control teams ready, and all weapon systems checked. Whatever attacked the Zalani might still be there." The ship's engines roared to life, pushing the Vengeance toward hyperspace. Jake felt the familiar sensation as they jumped, the stars stretching into lines before disappearing into the swirling blue of hyperspace. 14 hours to reach a system that might already be dead. During the journey, Jake called his senior staff to the briefing room. The faces around the table were grim. Dr. Helen Martinez, the chief science officer, had been researching everything she could find about attacks on peaceful civilizations. Chief Tactical Officer Ryan Parker had run combat simulations based on the little information they had. Chief Engineer Bobby Clark had the ship's weapons and shields running at peak efficiency. "What do we know about the Zalani defenses?" Jake asked. Ryan pulled up a holographic display showing the Kepler 442 system. They had 12 orbital defense platforms, each one armed with crystal resonance weapons. Those weapons could cut through most ship armor like paper. They also had a fleet of 60 patrol ships and 3 heavy cruisers. "And all of that is gone?" Lisa asked. "According to our sensors, yes. The system is completely silent. No energy signatures, no communication signals, nothing." Dr. Martinez leaned forward. "Captain, I've been checking our historical databases. There are records of similar attacks going back thousands of years. Always the same pattern. A peaceful system goes silent, and when scout ships arrive, they find nothing. No debris, no survivors, just empty space." "Any idea what could do that?" Jake asked. "The old records call them harvesters. Ancient entities that consume entire civilizations. Most species consider them myths or legends, but if the reports are true, they don't just kill. They absorb everything. Matter, energy, even information." The room fell silent. Jake looked at each of his officers in turn. These were good people, experienced fighters who had faced pirates, hostile aliens, and worse. But the fear in their eyes was real. "Sir," Ryan said carefully, "if these harvesters are real, and they've consumed the entire Zilani civilization, what can one ship do against them?" Jake stood up, his hands flat on the table. "We're going to find out. The Zilani called for help, and we're the only ones who heard them. Maybe we can't save them, but we can make sure whatever killed them doesn't spread to other systems." Amy's voice came through the ship's communication system. "Captain, we're dropping out of hyperspace in 5 minutes." Jake and his officers returned to the bridge. The main screen showed the swirling blue of hyperspace beginning to fade. Jake gripped the arms of his command chair. In a few moments, they would see what had happened to one of the galaxy's most peaceful civilizations. The stars appeared, sharp and bright against the black of space. But something was wrong. The gas giant that had been home to the Zilani was still there, but its rings were different. Instead of the beautiful crystal formations that had sparkled with reflected light, there were dark, twisted shapes moving in slow orbits. "Sensors report," Jake ordered. Ryan's voice was tight with shock. "Sir, I'm reading massive energy signatures throughout the system, but they're not Zilani. The patterns are completely unknown." On the main screen, something moved. It was huge, easily the size of a small moon. Its surface looked organic, like living tissue, but it pulsed with stolen energy. Around it, smaller shapes moved in patterns that looked almost like a swarm of insects. "Captain," Dr. Martinez said, her voice barely above a whisper. "That thing in the center, it's not just feeding on energy, it's growing, getting bigger." Jake stared at the screen, watching the massive entity pulse with each absorbed piece of matter. This was what had destroyed the Zilani. This was what had consumed an entire civilization in a matter of hours. And now, it was looking at them. "All hands. Battle stations," Jake announced over the ship's communication system. "This is not a drill. We have encountered a hostile force of unknown capabilities. Prepare for combat." Alarms began to sound throughout the ship as the crew rushed to their positions. The Vengeance's weapons powered up, and her shields came online. But as Jake watched the massive entity and its swarm begin to move toward them, he wondered if humanity's most powerful warship would be enough. The massive creature in the center of the system pulsed with a sickly green light. Jake watched it on the main screen, his hands gripping the arms of his command chair. The thing was easily 20 times larger than the Vengeance, and it seemed to be made of living tissue mixed with metal and crystal. Worse, it was still growing. "Ryan, what are those smaller contacts around it?" Jake asked. Chief Tactical Officer Ryan Parker worked frantically at his station. "Sir, I'm counting 237 separate vessels, but they're not built like any ships I've ever seen. They look alive." On the screen, the smaller ships moved like a school of fish, flowing around each other in perfect harmony. Their hulls were dark and smooth, pulsing with veins of light that matched the rhythm of the central creature. Some were long and thin, like snakes. Others were round with tentacles that moved through space as if swimming through water. "They're bioships," Dr. Helen Martinez said from her science station. Her voice was filled with wonder and horror. "Captain, those aren't machines. They're living creatures that have been turned into weapons." Lisa Bennett moved to stand beside Jake's chair. "Sir, if those are all hostile contacts, we're looking at odds of over 200 to 1. Jake nodded grimly. The Vengeance was powerful, but she was still just one ship. Even with her advanced weapons and shields, fighting over 200 enemies at once would be suicide. But as he watched the bioships move, he noticed something strange. "Ryan, are they scanning us?" "Yes, sir. Multiple sensor sweeps from different directions, but it's not like normal scanning. It feels more like they're tasting us." Amy Collins looked up from her communication station. "Captain, I'm picking up some kind of transmission from the central creature. It's not in any language I recognize, but the computer is trying to translate. Put it through the speakers." The bridge filled with a sound that made everyone's skin crawl. It was like whispers mixed with the sound of metal being torn apart. Slowly, words began to form from the noise. New flavor detected. Unknown patterns. Rich with potential. Jake felt his blood run cold. The thing was talking about them like they were food. More metal and flesh. Good for growth. Will add to collection. Dr. Martinez was scanning the bioships with every sensor the Vengeance had. What she found made her face go pale. Captain, these ships aren't just alive. They're made from the materials of other civilizations. I'm detecting Zelani crystal formations, Thurian plasma conduits, even some metals that match records of species that went extinct centuries ago. You mean those things are made from their victims? Lisa asked. Not just made from them. I think they are their victims. The organic parts, the living tissue I'm seeing, it has genetic markers from dozens of different species. This creature doesn't just kill civilizations. It absorbs them, uses their bodies and their technology to make more of itself. Jake stared at the screen as the horrible truth sank in. The 2 billion Zelani who had lived in this system weren't just dead, they had been turned into weapons, their bodies and minds absorbed into this nightmare creature and its fleet of bioships. Every vessel out there contained the remains of people who had once been alive, who had once had families and dreams. Sir, Ryan said urgently, the bioships are moving. They're forming an attack pattern. On the screen, the swarm of ships began to spread out, surrounding the Vengeance in a perfect sphere. They moved with coordination that no normal fleet could achieve because they weren't separate ships with separate crews. They were all part of one massive organism, controlled by the central creature. Evasive maneuvers, Jake ordered. Ryan, charge all weapons. Amy, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them what we've found here and warn them to prepare the home systems. Sir, at this distance, it will take 3 days for any message to reach Earth. Amy replied. Send it anyway. If we don't make it out of here, someone needs to know what's coming. The bioships attacked without warning. They didn't fire energy weapons or launch missiles. Instead, they spit streams of acid that could eat through ship armor, and they released clouds of tiny creatures that tried to burrow into the Vengeance's hull. Shields holding at 90%. Ryan reported as the first wave hit them. But, sir, these aren't normal weapons. The stuff they're using is trying to break down our shield matrix at the molecular level. Jake gripped his chair as the ship shook from multiple impacts. Return fire. All weapons full spread. The Vengeance's guns opened up, sending streams of energy and projectiles into the swarm of bioships. The weapons were designed to fight the toughest enemies humanity had ever faced, and they did their job well. 3 bioships exploded in bursts of green flame, and 2 more were cut in half by the ship's main laser cannons. But instead of debris floating away into space, something horrible happened. The destroyed bioships began to dissolve, their matter flowing back toward the central creature like liquid. Within minutes, the lost mass had been absorbed, and new bioships began to grow from the creature's surface. They're regenerating, Dr. Martinez said in shock. Every ship we destroy just feeds the main creature. It uses the matter to build new ones. Then we need to destroy them faster than they can rebuild, Jake said. Ryan, focus fire on the central creature. If we can kill the brain, maybe the rest will die too. The Vengeance turned toward the massive central creature and fired everything she had. Energy beams that could punch through a planet's crust struck the creature's surface, causing it to writhe and pulse with pain. But the damage was already healing, the creature using absorbed matter to repair itself. Worse, the attack seemed to make it angry. The creature's voice filled the bridge again, but this time it was louder and filled with rage. Defiant. Prey. Strong. Will. Good. For absorption. Will. Enjoy. Breaking. Spirit. More bioships swarmed toward the Vengeance, moving faster now and with more desperate hunger. Jake could see that they were learning from each attack, adapting their tactics in real time. The creature wasn't just absorbing the physical matter of its victims. It was absorbing their knowledge, their memories, their tactical skills. Sir, we're being overwhelmed, Lisa said as the ship shook from dozens of impacts. Shields down to 60% and falling. Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. They were afraid, but they were still fighting. Still doing their jobs despite facing something that had destroyed civilizations for millions of years. That was the difference between humans and every other species this creature had faced. Humans didn't give up. Amy, broadcast on all frequencies, Jake ordered. Tell any ship in range to stay away from this system. Tell them to warn others. Sir, what message should I send? Jake stood up from his chair, his eyes fixed on the nightmare creature on the screen. Tell them that humanity has found something that needs to be stopped. Tell them we're going to find a way to kill this thing, no matter what it costs. The creature's laughter filled the bridge, a sound like breaking glass and screaming metal. But Jake Morrison smiled back at it. The creature had absorbed countless civilizations, but it had never faced humans before. It was about to learn why that mattered. The Vengeance shook as another wave of bioships slammed into her shields. Jake held onto his chair as sparks flew from damaged control panels around the bridge. The ship's lights flickered, and he could hear the sound of metal groaning under stress. Shields down to 40%. Ryan called out over the noise of alarms. Sir, we can't keep taking hits like this. Jake looked at the tactical display. The swarm of bioships had them completely surrounded. Every time they destroyed one, the creature absorbed its remains and grew two more. They were fighting an enemy that got stronger with every victory. There has to be a way, Jake muttered to himself. He turned to Dr. Martinez. Helen, you said these things absorb everything from their victims. Their technology, their knowledge, everything. Yes, sir. That's how they can adapt so quickly. They're using the combined knowledge of every civilization they've ever consumed. Jake's mind raced. An idea was forming, crazy and dangerous, but maybe their only chance. What if we gave them something they couldn't digest, something that would hurt them instead of help them? Before Dr. Martinez could answer, the ship's communication system crackled to life. All hands, this is Chief Engineer Bobby Clark. We've got problems in the engine room. Those acid streams are eating through our hull in 3 places. I need damage control teams now. Jake pressed the intercom button. Bobby, how long can you keep the engines running? Maybe 20 minutes if we're lucky, sir. After that, we're dead in space. 20 minutes. Jake looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They were scared, but still fighting, still believing in him to find a way out of this mess. He couldn't let them down. Ryan, I need you to do something that's going to sound crazy. Stop shooting at the bioships. Sir? Ryan looked confused. You heard me. Hold fire on the small ships. I want all weapons focused on that big creature in the center. But don't try to destroy it. I want you to hurt it. Ryan nodded, though he clearly thought his captain had lost his mind. The Vengeance's guns turned toward the massive central creature and opened fire. Energy beams struck its surface, causing it to writhe and pulse with pain. The creature's voice filled the bridge again, angry and confused. Why do you fight? Resistance is pointless. Join us willingly, and death will be quick. Never, Jake said out loud, knowing the creature could hear him. We're human. We don't join anyone, we fight. While the main guns kept the creature distracted, Jake turned to Lisa. I need you to gather every Marine we have, full combat gear, including the new phase shift equipment. Sir, what are you planning? We're going to board one of those bioships. The bridge went silent except for the sound of weapons firing and alarms. Everyone stared at Jake like he had gone completely insane. Captain, Dr. Martinez said carefully, those ships are alive. They'll try to digest anyone who goes inside. Them. That's what I'm counting on, Jake replied. Helen, can you create some kind of virus? Something biological that would spread through their system? Dr. Martinez thought for a moment. Maybe, but it would have to be something they've never encountered before. Something their absorbed knowledge couldn't help them fight. What about a paradox? A piece of information that contradicts itself? That's actually brilliant, sir. If I could create a recursive loop, something that would make their adaptive systems turn against themselves. She started working frantically at her station. Meanwhile, Sergeant First Class Maria Santos had arrived on the bridge with 20 of her best Marines. They were wearing the latest human combat armor, black metal that could stop most energy weapons. But what made them special was the phase shift technology built into their suits. It allowed them to become temporarily non-solid, passing through walls and barriers. "Sergeant Santos," Jake said, "I need you and your team to board one of those bioships. Get inside and plant charges in their central nervous system." Maria nodded without hesitation. "Yes, sir. How do we identify the nervous system?" "Look for the brightest concentration of organic material. It'll probably be pulsing with the same rhythm as the main creature." Dr. Martinez looked up from her work. "Captain, I've got something. It's a piece of code that references itself in an impossible way. Like asking, can an all-powerful being create a rock so heavy that even they cannot lift it? The bioship systems will try to process it and get stuck in an endless loop. How do we deliver it?" "The Marines can upload it directly to their nervous system. But sir, once they do this, the bioship will probably try to purge them violently. They'll have maybe 2 minutes to get out." Jake looked at Maria and her Marines. These were good people, volunteers who had signed up to protect humanity. Now he was asking them to go inside a living nightmare and plant a virus that might not even work. "It's your choice, Sergeant," he said. "I won't order anyone to do this." Maria smiled, though her face was pale behind her helmet's visor. "Sir, we didn't join the Marines to live forever. We joined to make sure humanity does." The bioships were still swarming around the Vengeance, trying to break through her shields. Using the phase shift technology, the Marines turned themselves non-solid and passed through the ship's hull. They drifted through space toward the nearest bioship, invisible to its sensors. Jake watched on the tactical display as tiny dots representing his Marines disappeared inside the enemy vessel. For several long minutes, there was no word from them. Then Maria's voice crackled through the communication system. "We're inside, sir. This place is horrible. The walls are made of bones and flesh. I can see faces in the organic matter. They're still alive, sir. The absorbed people are still conscious." Jake closed his eyes for a moment. The nightmare was worse than he had imagined. "We found what looks like a brain," Maria continued. "It's huge, the size of a room. Dr. Martinez, I'm uploading your virus, now." On the main screen, Jake could see the bioship that his Marines had entered. For a moment, nothing happened. Then it began to convulse, its smooth surface rippling like water. The other bioships in the swarm stopped their attack and turned toward their infected companion. "It's working," Dr. Martinez said excitedly. "The virus is spreading through their communication network. All the bioships are connected to each other and to the main creature." The infected bioship began to tear itself apart from the inside. But instead of the usual process where destroyed matter flowed back to the main creature, something different happened. The dissolving ship released clouds of the virus, and every bioship that touched the clouds became infected too. "Marines, get out of there now," Jake ordered. "Already moving, sir," Maria replied. "This thing is coming apart fast." The bioships throughout the system began to turn on each other, their adaptive systems trapped in impossible logical loops. Ships that had been working together moments before now fired on their companions, each one trying to purge the virus by destroying infected vessels. But the main creature was still alive, and it was furious. Its voice boomed across space. No longer the confident whisper of a predator, but the roar of something in pain. "What have you done? This is not possible. We are eternal. We are inevitable." Jake stood up from his command chair and smiled at the massive creature on the screen. "You made one mistake. You absorbed all those civilizations, but you never learned the most important thing about humans. We don't give up. Ever." The bioships around the Vengeance were destroying each other in a frenzy of confusion and pain. Jake watched the tactical display as ship after ship tore itself apart, unable to process the viral paradox that Dr. Martinez had created. But his victory felt hollow as he looked at the massive central creature. The thing was changing. Instead of the smooth, pulsing surface they had seen before, the creature was growing spikes and armor plating. Its color shifted from sickly green to deep red like dried blood. Worst of all, it was getting bigger. "Sir," Dr. Martinez called out from her station. "The main creature is absorbing all the destroyed bioships. It's using their mass to transform itself into something new." "What kind of something?" Jake asked, though he was afraid of the answer. "I think it's becoming a weapon. A single, massive weapon designed to destroy us." The creature's voice filled the bridge again, but now it sounded different, more focused, more intelligent. "Clever, little humans. You have taught us something new. Pain. We had forgotten pain. Now, we will teach you about true suffering." The creature began to move, its massive bulk accelerating toward the Vengeance with impossible speed. Jake could see weapons forming along its surface, energy cannons and missile ports that looked like they had been ripped from a dozen different civilizations and fused together. "All power to shields," Jake ordered. "Bobby, I need everything the engines can give us." Chief Engineer Bobby Clark's voice came through the communication system, strained with effort. "Sir, the engines are already past the red line. I can give you maybe 5 more minutes of full power before we burn out completely." 5 minutes. Jake looked at the creature bearing down on them and knew it wouldn't be enough. The thing was the size of a small moon now, powered by the absorbed life force of billions of beings. Even if the Vengeance had been at full strength, they couldn't win this fight. But Jake Morrison had not come this far to give up now. "Lisa, get me a collision course," he said quietly. "Sir?" Lisa stared at him in shock. "You heard me. Plot a ramming. Course for the center of that thing. Full speed." "Captain," Dr. Martinez said, "a collision at that speed would destroy us both. That's the idea." Jake stood up from his command chair and looked around the bridge at his crew. These people had followed him into hell without question. Now he was asking them to die with him. "Sir," Amy said from her communication station, "I'm getting messages from the crew. They want to know what's happening." Jake walked to the ship's communication panel and pressed the button that would let him speak to every person aboard the Vengeance. 1,200 souls who had trusted him to bring them home. "This is the captain," he said. "I'm not going to lie to you. We're facing something that has destroyed entire civilizations. Something that turns living beings into weapons and feeds on their suffering. Our weapons can't stop it. Our shields can't protect us. But we can still win." He paused, looking out at the creature that filled the main screen. The thing out there thinks it's invincible because it's survived for millions of years. It thinks we're just another species to be consumed and forgotten. It's wrong. We're human. We don't surrender. We don't give up. And when something threatens innocent people, we make it pay. Jake's voice grew stronger. "Today we're going to show this ancient horror why nothing survives when a human warship arrives. We're going to ram that thing at light speed and blow our antimatter core at the same moment. The explosion will create a controlled singularity that will consume the creature and everything it's absorbed." The bridge was silent. Then, one by one, his officers began to nod. They understood what he was asking. They understood the cost. And they were willing to pay it. "Amy, send one final message to Earth Command," Jake ordered. "Tell them we found the source of the ancient attacks. Tell them it's dead. And tell them that 1,200 humans died making sure it could never hurt anyone again." The creature was almost on top of them now. Its surface was covered with weapons that could crack planets, all aimed at the tiny human ship that had dared to defy it. Energy beams lanced out, striking the Vengeance's shields and overloading them instantly. "Shields down," Ryan reported. "Hull breaches on all decks." "Collision in 30 seconds, Lisa announced. The creature's voice boomed one last time, filled with rage and disbelief. "Impossible. You cannot destroy us. We are eternal. We are the devourers of worlds." Jake smiled as he gripped his command chair. "No, you're not. You're just another bully who never learned that some fights are worth dying for." The Vengeance struck the creature at nearly the speed of light. The impact sent shockwaves through, space itself, tearing holes in reality. But Jake had timed it perfectly. At the exact moment of collision, Bobby Clark detonated the ship's antimatter core. The explosion was beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. It didn't just destroy matter, it unraveled the very fabric of space and time. The creature's massive bulk was pulled into a spinning vortex of gravity so intense that even light could not escape. For a brief moment, Jake could hear the voices of all the absorbed beings crying out as they were finally freed from their nightmare. The Zilani, the Thurians, and countless other species who had been trapped inside the creature for millions of years. Their voices joined together in a song of gratitude and release. Then there was silence. The singularity collapsed in on itself, taking the creature and all its absorbed victims into nothingness. Where the battle had raged, there was now only empty space and the slowly fading glow of destroyed matter. 3 days later, the first rescue ships arrived from Earth Command. They found nothing but debris and radiation. The official report would say that the UES Vengeance had encountered an unknown hostile force and had been destroyed in the resulting battle. But Amy's final message had reached Earth. Within hours, every human colony and outpost received the same transmission. It was broadcast on all frequencies, in every human language, and sent to every allied species in the galaxy. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the UES Vengeance. We have encountered and destroyed an ancient threat that has plagued the galaxy for millions of years. The entity known as the Harvester is dead. This sector is now under human protection. We are the species that refuses to be prey. We are the civilization that fights back. To any other threats listening to this message, remember what happened here. Remember that humans do not surrender. Remember that nothing survives when a human warship arrives. The message spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Other species who had lived in fear of the ancient legends began to hope. Pirates and raiders found themselves facing human patrol ships that fought with a fury they had never encountered. And somewhere in the dark between the stars, other ancient horrors heard the message and decided to look for easier prey. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy not as conquerors or traitors, but as protectors. They were the species that would stand against the darkness no matter the cost. They were the ones who would make sure that civilizations like the Zilani would never again face extinction alone. The Vengeance was gone, but her legacy lived on, in every human ship that patrolled the void, carrying the same message that Jake Morrison had sent in his final moments. The galaxy was no longer defenseless. Humanity was watching,